Welcome to another episode of the Pineapple Perspective, sponsored by Pepper Lunch Restaurants. I'm your host, Troy Hooper, and I am very excited for a bit of a different type of show today. We often have restaurant executives and well known names in the restaurant industry. We also have those adjacent vendors in usually the tech sectors, a lot of those that we get a chance to talk to. But we're taking this in a different direction today with our guest, Cameron Molberg. Has a long bio. We're going to talk about all the things he's done in the industry, not only started in restaurants, but is the CEO of a majorly cool, newer industrial concept on the production side of protein. So it ties into our audience and restaurant executives and restaurant operators who listen to this show. I wanted to bring the other side of the conversation, the supplier side of the conversation, to the table and sort of tie that into what's going on in that side of the industry and how us in restaurants can really think about our choices when it comes to supply chain. Particularly in this case, it'll be protein around poultry. But Cameron, glad to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Cameron, we start this conversation off with everybody the exact same way. We level set because this show is really about hospitality and how the hospitality concept can be applied to any business. And I'm excited to learn how you bring hospitality to chicken farming. I think that'll be pretty interesting. But we want to know you as the individual, Cameron. What does hospitality mean to you?
That could mean a million things, but just thinking about it, I think it's more of a feeling, and I think it's a feeling of being welcomed into an environment. I think back to my childhood, some of the best moments I had, going out to eat with my family is, that feeling of warmth and just being truly welcomed into the restaurant. You don't always get that. I mean, a lot of that's manufactured these days, but you know it when you feel it. And you go to a certain restaurant, they truly make you feel welcome, like you are actually a guest of theirs. I think that's what we're striving for.
So, Cameron, you kind of went into the second part of the question, which is how did you come up or how did you come to understand that? I mean, you said as a child, you really noticed it when you felt it or you experienced it. But then you went into hospitality, at least early in your career, you jumped into hospitality like many, many, many of us. I mean, it is the first job or the first job out of college or the job in college for many people, but you were interested in the food supply business from the get. And so it made sense to sort of touch base in the hospitality side or the front side of the business, which is the retail business. I started as a busboy in the second busiest Bennigan's in America and worked my way up to, well, here we are today. But, what else went into sort of understanding that and how do you bring that to life in your day to day, not just in sort of the specific business that you're running, but how do you extend hospitality?
Yeah, I think it's meeting people halfway. You know, People have expectations. When it can be many things to be quite honest, but it's just hearing people out. They have expectations. I'm pitching something to them. We need to find alignment. And I think if we can have that conversation and do it clearly and have clear understandings, then I think we've created an environment where we can both be happy and successful.
Yeah, and I align with you on the feeling piece of it, right? It is really about how you make people feel because there's a lot to be said. There's a lot of stats and numbers and things in the business world that we deal with. People really don't remember that about you. I don't remember Cameron in the business details of our conversation. What I remember is Cameron's a thoughtful guy who listens and considers and actually understands what's being said and can regurgitate that in a way that shows that he values what I have to say. Right? That's how we make people feel. I think that's a pretty important aspect to bring to life. Cameron, let's talk about your background. It's incredible. It's extensive, but you've chosen to make a life after some time in the actual restaurant business, which I want you to share that story with us. And you've moved your way into agriculture through your education first. You went to Texas Tech. You graduated in an industrial capacity. Really, you could have gone a lot of directions, right? You could have worked for a Compass Group on supply chain or manufacturing at a Procter and Gamble or anything like that. But you actually chose to get into the animal husbandry, animal food production side of the business. Take us through a little bit of your history there, from going to school and working in restaurants to where you're at today.
So, I mean, what really propelled me to get into the food industry from the get-go was the fact that me personally, I was fortunate enough to have a lot of rich experiences around food. My grandparents grew up, during the Depression, raised five kids in Central Texas. My grandfather was a tenant farmer and then eventually needed a more steady income and became a carpenter and quite skilled at that. And my grandmother was a stay-at-home mom for most of the time. I mean, back then, raising five kids was a challenge. It still is today, probably even different challenges, but I won't get into that. But all that being said, some of our most fond memories and moments were always around the dinner table or the lunch table. For some reason, that always just stuck with me. So when I went to college, I was like, wow, I could do anything. This is great. And so I ultimately decided to study animal science and food technology. Started off predominantly with animal science. And I was like, well, being in Texas, I could be like this big rancher or whatever. We have Six's Ranch out there, the King Ranch, and all these big ranches, and Nolan Ryan and beef, and all these big names. They're all Campbell's sausages. And so everybody, it's a big thing here in the state. And I never really had ideas of like brand illusions of like becoming on that level. But all that being said, I wanted to produce something that could be shared amongst people and friends and family and be part of that conversation. And so I studied animal science, and it was predominantly focused on, well, at Texas Tech, we didn't have a poultry science division, but we did do a lot of eggs. We didn't do meat chicken, at least very small amount, but it was predominantly in Texas, cattle king. So we focused on cattle and pork production. But ultimately I said, well, this isn't necessarily the route. I don't necessarily want to be in the ranch side of things and, rearing out cattle for 22 months before you can actually take them to market. I want something with a more a quicker turnaround. So ultimately, I kind of pivoted and started focusing on food technology. I love science. I love reading about science. I love learning about it. It's not just food focused. It's also, whatever, all science I think is fascinating. And so I studied that for a while, and that's where it started really dawning on me that there was something different about the food industry, the side of it that I didn't really, as a consumer, it didn't really resonate with me. The fact that we were making products as shelf stable as possible, that we were putting additives and enhancing them to improve palatability. But, all these things that we learn about now about how ultra processed foods are somewhat, ultra processed foods are arguably detrimental to our health, whereas, more minimally processed, more natural foods, more foods that are fresher have a better impact on not only our mental health, but our physical health. And so, when I was in animal science, I was like, well, there seems to be a disconnect here between what the consumer wants and what we're actually giving them. And so at that point, I knew there wasn't really a path for me in in food technology going down that route. I wasn't interested in food additives and preservatives and yellow number whatever and red number X. And so then I was like, well, at this point I'd already been in school for like probably 3.5 years. And I'm like, I need to graduate. What's the next angle that I can go in the food industry? And so I looked at institutional management, and there is a component of restaurant and hotel management. It's business focused curriculum. And I was like, okay, this seems more like in line with what I want to do. And so ultimately I graduated with institutional management. All the while, I had to pay the bills, especially being in college for, I guess all in all, like 5 years. Graduated with like 186 hours, which was like 50 hours more than I needed just because of the program switches. But anyways, all that being said, I did get into the restaurants, and I was like, this is kind of fun. I really enjoy this, actually working with people, making food. And so I managed a couple restaurants towards the end of my college tenure, I think in like 2005-ish. I can't remember the date exactly. I had the privilege of helping open a steakhouse and brewery, being one of the founding members of that team in Lubbock. And that was a really interesting experience. And then ultimately, when I left Lubbock and came to Austin, one of the first things I did was immediately went into restaurant management, and then found a group of individuals that were looking to open 2 quick service organic restaurants. And that's really where the whole story kind of makes the big shift to agriculture at that point.
Because the organic opportunity caught your attention and allowed you to stretch that interest in the more scientific, meaning more simpler. It's funny, the more scientific minded you are, maybe the more simpler you want to solve a problem with, right? Is wait, this is way over processed, this is way over thought, this is way over touched, right? So
Yep.
so did those restaurants come to light? Was that something that was able to happen? And what was the thesis of the, was it like a vegan restaurant or a general? Tell us a little bit
No.
about that, because I think that's going to
So
play into what kicks you over into the ag side.
exactly. Yeah. And that's so I came, into Austin and I was thinking like, wow, what a great place to be in the food side of the industry, food scene, hospitality management, whatever you want to call it. But so, what really piqued my interest was this organic quick service restaurant. And I was like, wow, we can build a restaurant from the ground up. The whole concept amongst, we had a management team of, I think there were 5 of us, the owner, that sounds about right. The owner and then 5 management staff. And so we started building out this franchise. But the problem that posed was, so it's an organic hamburger style restaurant. We did burgers and shakes and fries and stuff like that. We had no problem finding the potatoes and sweet potatoes and stuff like that. But when it came to the actual vegetables, like your lettuce, your tomatoes, pickles, onions, all that stuff, we're like, well, and then we're like, we can't find any of this stuff locally. Like, where's the stuff coming from? Well, it's coming from California and Mexico. And then we started thinking more critically about the meat, and like, okay, where's this beef coming from? It's coming from California, and the chicken's coming from northern Colorado, and we just couldn't find any of the stuff in the state of Texas. Here, I don't know, at that time, maybe 26 million people living in the state of Texas, probably one of the largest. I can't remember if we're the second or third largest state in the nation, but we have all this land, but none of it's organic. It's like, what is going on here? And so, and this is in 2008. So we opened up the first restaurant, and received pretty good reviews. We were really excited about it, and just like any restaurant, one of the guys that I worked with at the steakhouse, he was one of our grill guys. He was like, starting any restaurant, it's like that. It's like a radio, and analog radio. It's like you can hear it. It's almost humming, but you just got to keep tweaking that knob, and once you get it, you know it. And so we were just fine tuning that signal on the restaurant. And I think we really hit our stride about 6 to 9 months down the road, at which point we opened up the second location. But still, the problem was there. We just did not have the local organic product for the restaurant. So we had to work with distributors all across the United States to be able to just service these 2 restaurants in Austin, Texas. So just by coincidence, one of my vendors, who is a local, actually one of the only items that we had at the time was actually local, was our eggs, our pasture-raised eggs. And she was like, I manage this farm, and I'm leaving that farm. And we'd already known each other for many years. She'd been selling us eggs for that time, so I knew her background. And so it just dawned on me. I was like, well, I have animal science, I've got the food tech, I've got institutional management. I think I want to make the jump from restaurant to agriculture. Let's see if we can't figure out how to kind of bolster up the supply and get more of these products into, more of the local production for these restaurants that actually want it and need it. And that's what I did. For, I guess, 6 months later, I jumped on board and joined that egg operation. We were servicing, I don't know, maybe 5, 10 restaurants and a couple retail grocery stores at the time. So not a ton. It's a pretty small operation. I think we had 2,500 birds when I first got there. But I knew that if I could grow and scale that business, then I could increase the awareness for these types of products. And a component of that business was there was a feed mill. That's an infrastructural piece of it. So if you're going to have livestock, you have to be able to feed them, especially animals that are monogastric, like your swine and your poultry. When it comes to your ruminants, like your cattle and so forth, they can graze on grass and stuff like that. But monogastrics do need a more diverse diet, like again, turkeys, poultry, all that stuff, chicken. And so by bolstering the feed mill and creating more awareness for an organic product, then I knew we could bring in more farmers into the mix to produce these products for farmers markets and food service institutions. So it's an infrastructural piece. So if we could build out that feed mill and then ultimately increase the supply of the feed for the farmers, then in theory, we would have more products. And so that's what we did. Over the next, I think, 6 or 7 years, we've gone from, 1x to, I think, 7.5x in terms of our growth and the impact in the marketplace. The impact in the marketplace is actually exponentially more than that, just because of the true trickle down economics of how that actually works. But yeah, so that's what got me into the animal side of the industry. There being a lack of supply.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's amazing to hear because you saw the problem and said if we wanted to have more organic restaurants and better, cleaner food, somebody's got to get over here and try to figure out the supply side that is the challenge. And you decided to make that leap, and you're making impact for sure, as we'll get to where you're at today in a little bit. Go back to was the long distance supply issue, was that primarily because you were looking for organic? Is it that there are no tomatoes in Texas, or is it just that there are? And look, I know California has a tremendous amount of tomatoes. So was it just the lack of organics at scale to support the business and the volume you needed in Texas, or was it generally just not available and so difficult to get that you had to go all over the place to get organic specific products? Because I assume if
Yeah.
you're an organic burger, fries, and shakes, that you want all of the products to come in the door to also be all labeled organic, right?
Yeah, to the best of our abilities. There were certain things from time to time that were a little bit more increasingly difficult to find, or not increasingly difficult, but maybe the seasonality of certain things made it a little bit difficult. But to your question, yeah, there really wasn't much organic production in the state of Texas at that time. I would say shortly thereafter, I mean, we did have small little farms in and around Austin. Like one of the first organic farms probably in the state of Texas is actually, I think, on the east side of Austin. It's called Boggy Creek Farm. They're still in operation today. It was Caroline currently, and her former partner Larry, that ran that operation for many, many years. And they did have an on-farm stand, that still do, and could service their small community. But when it came to serving 300 tickets a day, there's not a chance. There was nobody in the state that could handle that volume. Since then there have been some larger CSAs come on board and do their own distribution, actually have consistent supply of product to be able to satisfy some of these restaurants and some grocery stores for that matter, and farmers markets. But it's kind of it's still, we, even growing up, like I remember going to the first Whole Foods that was in Dallas, and just from the 80s to mid 2000 or early 2000s, the industry it was very, very slow growth. And it really wasn't until probably the last 10 to 15 years that we've actually seen a steady incremental growth in the industry. And I think that's largely due to the fact of consumer awareness. People are starting to understand what the differences are and the impact it has on their health.
I think investment has helped a lot, and like you said, where there are consumers who are interested in and create demand, investment will follow, right? And so for many years, investment tried to sort of force it. And I use examples. One of the largest food shows in the world is a natural food show in Anaheim, California, every year, right? Expo West is a natural food show, inundated with beverages, all the kombucha you'd ever want in your life, and teas, but snacks. And I went to a party this year. I was invited, and it was, it was the CEO had been to like four other. I didn't even know there were four other organic macaroni and cheese companies, right? And she had started her own, and this whole, and I was like, this organic mac and cheese company is big enough to have this party and these investors. And I was just fascinated how big the industry, to your point, has gotten, and how big the investment had gotten. And we're talking about like a single product line on on a shelf of, my son loves mac and cheese. And so we chose early on, wherever we can, we're going to buy those organic materials, cost be damned, right? But at the end of the day, for a restaurant operation, I want to stick with that for a second. As you're trying to run an organic burger concept, how impactful is the cost of that supply chain of all organic materials wherever you can to the end product, and ultimately the profitability of? I mean, it's very difficult to make money in the restaurant industry as a whole, and those of us have kind of figured out some ways to do it in a higher level of return on investment. My God, to think about turning everything organic within that business and not have the support of that's a product that is at scale being adopted. Like I'm the one pioneering it. You're pioneering the use of organic pickles or organic raised cows for cheese, right? Or however you can get those products. How did you guys even model that out, and how did that come to market in a way that was sustainable financially as a restaurant? Was it just that Austin, Texas has enough people that would adopt that product over, let's say, a Shake Shack or somebody else in town?
Yeah, I mean, Austin, fortunately, well, unfortunately and unfortunately, has a lot of old money, but also a lot of new money with the tech sector and whatnot. But the tech sector didn't really start blowing up until, again, probably 10 to 15 years ago. Dell Computers has been here, Apple's here, Google, Tesla, you name it. But this is, predates a lot of that. At that time, we just knew that we had a very health conscious, very active city that we were operating in, and that people would seek out this product. I think the demographics help out. We have a lot of pretty high college graduation rate. And that's not to say that we were trying to be exclusive to that demographic. Obviously, sometimes it's the counter to that actually, the folks that don't have that may very well need this more than anybody else. But all that being said, I think, is this something that's going to work in Tupelo, Mississippi? Probably not. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it doesn't resonate. Maybe it's not something, or maybe people don't seek out something like this in those type of areas. Maybe they do a lot more home cooking, whatever the case may be. But we did have a population to support it, and a consumer that we felt was educated enough on the topic to be able to gravitate towards the product. Looking at the economics of it, looking back on it now, I remember people saying, gosh, an organic hamburger and fries and a drink, it's like between $8 and $10 back then. This is 2008, 2010. And, I'm thinking back, I'm like $8 to $10 for like an organic meal. Nowadays, gosh, I go out to a restaurant and get a sandwich alone. It's like $18, but obviously,
That combo started today would be $27-$28 for sure.
Yeah, especially if you bring the kids. But yeah, I mean, we had and as families, a lot of families that would come out there. So we had like a splash pad and a lot of things and activities and playscape, fun things for the kids. And they made it a destination. They made it an experience, and that's, I think, what really resonated with people.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to call out one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, and subsequently I'm going to have one of your colleagues, Diego, on, and then this is part of a series that we're going to do leading up to a deeper conversation about supply chain and how the restaurant industry can get partnered with you on a specific product called Greener Pastures Chicken, which you're the CEO of today. We'll talk about that shortly, but I wanted to call out one of the main reasons I was very interested in this conversation and getting to know you and your team and this product even better is that I've long had an interest in exactly what you just said, bringing cleaner, healthier food in a more convenient way to folks who do need it more than can pay for it, to economically adjust the system so that people who have traditionally been left out of the cleaner, healthier food supply chain, people in food deserts, as we refer to them, where actual grocery is not available or the grocery stores don't have fresh ingredients, and certainly organics wouldn't even be on the table in most of those communities. I co-founded a brand called Nourish in 2018, 2019. The Kiwi Restaurant Partners, my consulting and brand development company, created a concept we were going to bring to market. And unfortunately, the day that COVID lockdown happened in California is the day we were standing in a glass building expecting a check to build the first number of those restaurants. But Nourish was a micro food hall of 8 menus. Those menus would all eventually become independent restaurant brands. Those 8 menus was taking clean, organic, and healthier for you ingredients and proving that it didn't have to be just a salad with some protein, right? God bless Sweet Greens, predominantly in affluent communities. they're serving a great product to a group of people that want it and can pay for it. Fantastic. And there's others like them. There's other salad based or more healthful organic concepts. In California, we're very fortunate to see a lot of these things get developed, whether it was Tender Greens or Tokayo Organica or others like it. But we created Nourish because we believe that you could scale down the size of and the investment requirement to bring a pod kitchen, basically a shipping container kitchen, custom built, into these communities at a very low cost compared to a brick and mortar development, and serve a variety of foods across different genres: Italian, Indian, American, traditional American food, sandwiches and things, and offer this variety, but have all the ingredients share one rule, which was that all of the ingredients were regional, seasonal, sustainable, or in organic, as you say, when possible, as much as possible, and that all the ingredients would come from within 350 miles of the location, because we want to reduce that greenhouse gas supply chain long haul piece of the equation. And so we developed this. We spent a year and a half, almost 2 years, developing this concept and believing that if we could just make that kind of product, organic, clean, healthy, known and direct source product, available at a reasonable price within these communities, we know the communities will pay for it. We did some tests. We opened a couple of these individual branded restaurants in communities like Bloomfield, New Jersey, with one of our partners who we found had started Mangia Organica, the Italian concept we adopted. And, that's a predominantly Black and Hispanic community that drastically supported this concept, because most people in America, and I would say most of my colleagues in the restaurant industry, don't know this, and I'm saying it out loud intentionally, is that the African American and Hispanic communities are adopting organic and vegetarian and veganism at a mega multiplier of everybody else, because at this age of the young millennial, elder xennial demographic, they've just said enough's enough. They've watched their parents and grandparents die in their 40s and 50s from heart disease, hypertension, diabetes particularly, and they have just said enough. Do I want fried chicken? Yes, but I'm going to get organic, or I'm going to get pasture raised, or I'm going to get even plant-based. I'm going to get non-protein based. And I'm going to do that at scale across as many products as I can. So the demand is there. There's folks like myself and yourself that, when you were on the retail side, want to bring it to the market. But to your point, and the reason we're talking in part is because the supply chain doesn't offer it at scale, and where it's available, because it's at such a small scale overall to the over market, it's not economically viable. So there's specialty producers, specialty distributors, specialty retailers, and so the product is very expensive, and it makes it prohibitive to switch to if you didn't start your concept that way, right? I want to argue that and say out loud, I think you can switch a product here and there over time and convert your concept to be more sustainably sourced, more direct relationship, known supply chain relationship. And certainly you can look at all of the badges of certified organic and pasture raised and these other things, which you're far more knowledgeable about than I am. But that, I think, it is economically viable. And what makes it economically viable is that if more people do it at larger scale, especially existing brands that have existing scale, this could become much more affordable to everybody much more quickly. And I think you're right. 60s, 70s, and 80s, veganism and all that, earthy, crunchy. And then 90s, late 90s, definitely early 2000s, a little bit more approachable. Now we all understand it. I really do think the average consumer understands it. I think they appreciate it. To your point, go to Whole Foods, pretty popular spot. Sprouts, pretty popular spot. And then your regular neighborhood restaurant. How big has the organic section gotten in at least produce, right? And now more and more in protein. But I just don't think it's. I don't think, as you'll help me understand now, is the benefits. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits, particularly as I've learned from getting to know you guys, particularly on the protein side, that you can actually pass through the healthful benefits based on how the animal is raised. And to your point, definitely talk more about the feed, because you guys have done your own thing on the feed. But help us understand, as professionals and as consumers, how that passes through and how the benefits can really matter.
Well, and that's really unfortunate timing on the concept with COVID. That unfortunately put a lot of
We'll
things
bring
in.
it back.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you got a good thing going there. But going to the organic, I mean, there's tons of health benefits. I mean, you're growing poultry, you're growing your products, your fruits and vegetables without harmful persistent pesticides and stuff that are endocrine disruptors, hormone disruptors. They're not gonna get saturated and clog up your liver and cause a bunch of issues. You know, there's so many things on the conventional side of the industry that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole. That's obviously not stuff that you want to put in your body. There are pesticide and herbicide residues on these things and then they do pass through into our body. But the benefit of the organic is, there are organic alternatives to obviously the synthetic products that are sprayed on our foods that are natural and work in conjunction with our environment and our bodies and our immune system and so forth. So I guess more specifically as it relates to our poultry, our birds have outdoor access. And, the first 2 to 3 weeks, typically 14 to 18 days, when you're raising a bird, they have to be indoors. Just the way it is. Unless you have a mother hen that's actually sitting on the bird and helping maintain their body temperature, which in an industrial setting or commercial setting, you cannot do that. It's just not viable. But the birds during the first 14 to 18 days cannot regulate their own body temperature. So we have to create an environment that's comfortable for them and allow them to grow out their down feathers. During that process, we're giving these birds not only plenty of space, but we're giving them what we call enrichments, basically like perches and roosts and things to exercise on and run around. Just like, if you have a kid, I always equate, chickens in days to years because they grow so much faster. They reach maturity so much faster than humans do. So, you give your kid toys and play sets and things like that. It's basically the same for our poultry. Obviously, it's not like Fisher Price. We don't have Fisher Price roosts out there, but part of it is for their mental and physical well-being. If they're exercising and being able to utilize these enrichments in their environment, they're building stronger muscular structures. They're strengthening their skeletal structure. They're slowing them down. We're not running these birds like race cars, like you would at a factory farm. We're not just pumping it, blowing and going with them and feeding them nonstop and leaving the lights on 24/7 so that encourages them to eat nonstop. We try to emulate their natural environment as much as possible. So they have at least 8 hours of continuous darkness each night so their body can rest and so they have time to recover and to grow more slowly, which is more in line with their natural lifestyle. But after let's say 14 to 18 days that they've been in the brooder, then we move them out to the pasture. And on the pastures where I like to think a lot of the magic happens, we move them from a fresh spot of grass every single day. So that way they're eating the bugs, eating the grass, they're digging in the soil, they're exhibiting their actual natural behaviors that they would do if in the event they were out in the wild. And so, just allowing them to, conduct themselves in such a way or creating an environment that mimics their natural lifestyle, it does produce a far superior product. I mean, product texture, um, the appearance, the body composition is different. You don't see the big old flap of leaf fat, which is at the abdominal cavity that you'd find on a normal chicken. You don't have the subcutaneous fat on the thighs. You don't have that big old fat cap around the back of the breast where it meets the wing. And that's because, again, the birds are getting exercise and they're doing what they should be doing and what they want to be doing. And then also you'll notice that the color of the meat is a little bit more pink. It's a little bit darker. And that's in part to the fact that we don't use bleach in the processing of the birds. But more importantly, that's actually because the muscles are getting exercise. They're getting increased blood flow to those muscles. So there's more myoglobin there, which helps, which contributes to the color of the finished product as well. When it comes to their diet, a lot of operations solely rely on corn and soy and their vitamins and trace mineral premixes. Our diet's far more diverse than that.
So when it comes to poultry, yeah, if you're going to raise poultry, you're going to be feeding some type of feed formulation. And again, conventional side, it could be a bunch of things, but we don't have additives, we don't have hormones, no antibiotics, we don't have any of that stuff there. And the reason why that stuff is in the conventional feeds is because they're in such a closed environment where it's basically a petri dish. So if any type of bacteria gets in there, it's basically just going to explode. Our stance on that is how about we not put them in a petri dish in a closed environment and actually give them fresh air and sunshine and then not have to medicate them. And so that's the organic approach. It's like give them an area, give them a healthy, clean lifestyle and let them flourish as opposed to confining them and requiring which requires them to have medication that's in their feed. But all that being said, yeah, we have a diverse diet. The feed is the baseline, but just like anything, I consider the pasture to be like supplemental. It's your salad bar. It's where you're getting all your vitamins and additional minerals and things like that that you wouldn't get in your diet otherwise. And so I think largely people that have tried our product do notice right off the bat that there is something different. And a lot of people think chicken is chicken. It's not. There's big differences in the quality that you get from a factory operation versus a pasture-raised organic operation.
I'm very fortunate to have been invited to take a tour of Greener Pastures Chicken. And having grown up in this industry, I've been to a lot of processing plants and farms. I actually lived for some time north of Atlanta. And as you know, that North Georgia, well, all of Georgia, but North Georgia and North Carolina, South Carolina line, Tennessee line, there's a lot of poultry going on up in there. And seeing a lot of birds on the back of semi trailers running down the road in open cages, pretty dejecting kind of environment to witness. But yeah, I think the feed to me was pretty interesting. It's what you put in is what you get out, right? Same with our bodies. What you put into the chicken is what gets out into our bodies. It passes straight through. No different than the ground you raise your vegetables in absorbs those minerals. And for those of us who enjoy a good wine, there's no better place to really experience that directly than to compare a Cabernet from different regions of California to the same types of grapes to different regions of France and Italy and these other places. You can tell it. I mean, to the point that sommeliers can tell the difference by the flavor, exactly where it came from, like down to the neighborhood, And
Mm-hmm.
so one day, hopefully I can tell the difference between a organic pasture raised chicken, blind taste test, and I think I probably even might could today. It's quite a different experience, but one of the things I think I wanted to highlight is the benefit, though, Cameron, that the ingredients, the fats, whether it's omegas or the minerals, they pass through to us. So the healthier the chicken, the cleaner the chicken, the better for our bodies and the more absorbability and digestibility. Is that right?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. There's been a lot of nutritional studies on the differences in the improvements, not only in just organic quality of poultry, but also, you add that added level of pasture raised on it. When we're looking at good nutrition, like the pinnacle, what we're shooting for, like, corn and soy is very high in omega 6s, very low in omega 3s. For good heart health and mental health is arguably true too. You want a more equal balance between omega 3s and omega 6s. It's difficult to have an omega 3 level higher than omega 6, I mean, without supplementation. But birds on pasture and birds that are fed organic, especially when it comes to eggs, can almost reach a 1-to-1 omega 3 to omega 6 ratio. You compare that to conventional side of the industry, it's 20-to-1 omega 6 to omega 3. So you're way off the charts in the bad area when you're dealing with commodity chicken that's not pasture raised. When it comes to your meat chicken, it's probably 3-to-1, which again, conventional side probably 20-to-1. So you see huge benefits in reducing your omega 6 dietary burden by switching over to a pasture raised organic product. Not only that, I mean, like you said, you have higher vitamin A, D, E, and K, all your fat soluble vitamins. You have higher vitamin and mineral content. And these are things that, minerals are electrolytes and other things. These are things that help us fire and, operate on a cellular level. And if you don't have those, if you're deplete or deficient, then, not only is our metabolism messed up, but it also just makes us more sluggish, less effective in our day to day. And it's just unfortunately, it's a downward spiral. It's not something you notice overnight. You don't notice this decline in your overall health just from one day to the next. It's something that's just people are so familiar with or used to that they just like when they get to that point, they're just like, why am I tired all the time? Why do I not feel good? Why does this make me feel so sick all the time? It's like, if you move away from that and give your body some time to recover, like a month or two, maybe more if it's more severe, you actually do start having more energy. You start becoming more lively. Your overall health improves. Your cholesterol drops. We've been so far removed from natural food over the last 30, 45 years. It really all started like in 1933, I believe, when the food industry, we had a glut of overproduction. And so people started realizing, well, we can turn corn and soy into these, byproducts and we can feed them to people. And it really took off in the 60s and 70s, and gosh, 2000, the late 90s and 2000s, then it just blew up into the industry it is now. But I mean, if people, I think, focused a little bit more on whole foods, especially when it comes to protein, you don't have to eat a ton of protein to be satiated and to be healthy, but you got to eat a ton of poor quality protein to get all the amino acids that you need to sustain
Yeah.
yourself. So I like to say that, going to your point, we like to say you are what your animals eat. But also at the same time, if I had a grass-fed beef, 6-ounce grass-fed beef steak versus a 12-ounce feedlot steak, I'll take that grass-fed beef steak first and foremost over that feedlot steak anytime, just because the nutrient dense, it's cleaner, it's better fat profile, and it's going to do my body much more service.
Well, Cameron, we've just got a couple of minutes. This is a 3-part series, chatting with you to get to know you and the beginnings of this process of Greener Pastures Chicken. But we're going to have you and your colleague Diego on in a subsequent show. We're going to have Diego on separately, talk about his journey and his role and his reasons for being involved in the things that he's doing in the industry to help Greener Pastures Chicken make its way to the market. But tell us real quick, what is Greener Pastures Chicken? How did it come to be? And, maybe a 120-second infomercial here. We want to get people awareness of it and want them to come back to the subsequent episode in this series to really learn a lot more about the farm and what the farm does and how the farm is growing and where the product is available and all that. But give us a quick infomercial on it so people can start to do their own research and get more interested.
Yeah. One thing that really, I think there's a big disconnect between, what the consumer thinks they're getting versus what the industry actually is. So imagine birds out on pasture, foraging around and digging through the grass. That's what Greener Pastures is. And basically, we're the first commercially available pasture-raised organic chicken operation in the state of Texas. It's hard to believe that we have now 28 to 30 some odd million people in the state of Texas, and we're the only pasture-raised organic operation. In fact, actually, I believe we're the only one within about 800 to 1,000 miles of Austin, Texas. We're non-GMO project verified, which means we obviously don't utilize GMOs in any of our production. That's also a component of organic. If it's organic, it's non-GMO. But we're also the first, and I think to this date, still the only regenerative organic certified chicken operation in the United States. And so that means we take our carbon footprint, our sustainability to the next level. We reduce, where our supplies come from. We try to mitigate that stuff as much as possible from bringing stuff out of state and, outside of our local communities. But beyond that, there's also a social welfare component of it. So we do pay our staff a living wage. We feel that's very important to their well-being. So we don't just look at the chicken. We have to take into account that this is a closed loop. We can't take care of the chickens without taking care of the people. And we can't provide the high quality product that we want to provide to the consumer by being exploitative on either one of those ends. So we go above and beyond. Greener Pastures is really kind of it's just a different type of production system altogether. You're not going to see it at this scale anywhere else across the United States. And we take the quality of our product very seriously.
I've seen it. Happy birds on new grass every day with a custom organic feed. And not to mention, and I know people don't always want to talk about the processing side of the business. The reality is we are raising birds to feed humans, and there is the process of bringing them to market. And you guys did something very different that has not been done in a very long time. Talk about the building real quick and opening of your own processing plant.
Yeah, so in the US, you have big producers that, big factory operations that are processing 600 birds a minute, and that's light speed, and you're doing that at multiple plants across the country. Whereas some of these large folks are doing about 1 million, 2 million birds a day. So you have these massive plants, and then you have these really small farm scale plants, that's obviously for those type of operations and the throughput that they in their customer base, that's exactly what they need. But you have this huge disparity in the United States between these large factory producers and these small on-farm producers, and you have nobody in between. And so we started planning this processing facility, I think, in 2022. No, sorry, 21. And we just finally launched it in November, at the end of November of 23, kicking the tires on the facility and feel like we really hit our groove as of late. But we're able to do 10,000 birds a day. So about 40,000 birds a week. So we're about maybe 25 to 50 times smaller than one of the plants, one of the large scale plants, but then we're also 25 times larger than one of the small, on-farm plants. So we can really push a lot of volume through our facility. And what's really unique about it is I don't know of a single plant that has been built in the United States that is of our size in the last 20, 30 years. So it's kind of extremely unique in that sense. But yeah, so it is very unique in what our capabilities are. And so hopefully this is something that we can replicate.
It's unique in that it's on the farm, right? So chickens aren't put on the back of trailers and sent a mile, 10 miles, 20 miles down the road or whatever it usually is. Even if it's just a handful of miles, that's a stressor that results in, it goes into the product. If the bird is stressed right before it's slaughtered, then that is reflected in the product. Same for any animal. And so the fact that yours is mere feet away, a couple hundred yards to a few yards away, reduces that time and that stressor. I think that is reflected in the product. Cameron, this has been absolutely fascinating. We are going to stop mid-sentence because we want to leave a cliffhanger. We want people to come back to episode 2 and episode 3 of this series, where we'll talk to Diego, your colleague, who focuses on the sales side and focuses on the messaging side and getting the word out about what it is you guys do so well. We'll leave a teaser that if you want to hear who the 2-time winning Super Bowl champion MVP partner is in this business that founded this farm with Cameron, you're going to have to come back to another episode to hear that. But I think there's a lot more to talk about. And when we get you and Diego together on episode 3 of this series, we're really going to talk about this product, this chicken, the market strategy, how restaurants could, can, and should understand where their supply chain comes from. They should at the very least start challenging their suppliers on the product and the quality and the husbandry of how these animals are brought to market. I'm looking forward to the continuation of this conversation and really, really glad you could join us.
Thanks, Troy.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to The Pineapple Perspective. If you loved today's episode, leave a review and a 5-star rating. I look forward to welcoming you back next time.